Greetings and welcome back to CS195 Web Development. This is week 4, more HTML tags. Today's lesson, HTML internal links. So if you remember from last lesson, we worked on just how to add a link. So that should help us with today's lessons as well, because we don't actually need to learn a lot of the syntax. We're just going to understand what it even means to have an internal link. So if you think about it, last lesson, what was the tag that we used? All right, so pause for a second. All right, what tag? It wasn't the link tag, it was the A tag. And remember, it had a closing tag because whatever you put in the middle of it, that is what it's actually clickable. So again, all those principles same apply. We're still going to use our H reference. But we're going to understand today, our objective, understand how to add a link to the same page. And you've seen this before on especially like frequently asked question pages, where you go ahead and you click at a link at the top and it takes you down to the bottom, and then they have a link that says take you back to the top. That's what I mean by the same page, like literally the same web page, not the same website, not like Google takes you to Google Docs. Like it's just Google takes you to lower down on the Google page. At the end of the lesson, you'll be able to demonstrate this using a con challenge. So what's our success criteria? Students will demonstrate adding an internal link tag along with the proper attribute into the correct location into HTML. So basically what you did last time, but it's going to be internal. And there is one more step. So the actual tag itself is super simple, but there is one more step, kind of like when we were using CSS. You have to tell it where to go, right? And how do you do that? So kind of like CSS, if we want to select a place to go, a very specific place, we had to use this thing called ID, right? So we'll play the con video real quick. I want you to look for that. The link itself is going to be pretty straightforward, but how do you go down? If you look at what she has right here, she has a lot more information this time, which means you're able to scroll down and actually see this work. So let's watch the video real quick and look for that additional piece we need to add.
Links are a great way of connecting one web page to another web page, but they can also connect one part of a web page to another part of that same web page, especially on really long web pages, like for a table of contents. I've now added a bunch more information to this page so that I could give you a history of the web and a history of HTML versions, and I think it's enough content that it deserves a table of contents. And I've started one up here, just an unordered list with list items with each of the section titles. And I want to link each of these section titles so you can click them and just go to that part of the page. To do that...
All right, so watch this. Take the time, pay attention. This is important. I see people get this wrong all the time. If you want to add a link and it's already inside of a tag, you just wrap the link around what you want to click. Be careful not to put it on the outside, not a tag here, close the a tag on the outside, or just kind of stare at the screen for 10 seconds or longer because you have no idea what to do. Again, if something's already there, you just put the a tag around it.
I once again use the a tag. So I'll start by just wrapping this title in start and end tags for a. Now, what should go as the href of this link? Well, we need to...
That's the crux of this. So this is where it's important. She's just going to link to someplace lower on here. How do we do that?
Somehow tell the browser where to jump to in the web page. Some way of uniquely identifying that part of the page. If you've learned CSS selectors already, you've actually seen how to do this, in fact. We can do it by adding an ID attribute to a tag. Let's scroll down and find the heading here. And we'll add an ID attribute to this heading. So I'm going to put my cursor in H2, type ID equals.
All right, attribute equals quotes. Got to drill that into your head. Attribute equals quotes. One of the biggest mistakes is not getting those right and then making sure it's in that first tag, right? Another thing to think about is when you have this already, or like the con challenge you're about to do, is it might already have an ID, so you might just need to go up here when you're building this and just scroll down like, oh, banana is what I need, so I just type in banana. So you just don't type in banana, page, what do you in CSS? What do you put in front of an ID? So hopefully have that on top of your head. Answer that in your head, and then we'll see real quick.
And come up with a good identifier that's unique, like web-history. Okay, let's scroll back up to the link. And now, in order to tell the browser to go to this internal link, we need to start with a hash sign.
Remember, that's what we did in CSS. IDs have hashes in front of them.
And then type exactly the ID like we typed it below. Okay, so now pause this talk through.
And I'm going to do that. And again, when I click on this, it takes me down to that history of the web, right? The history of the web, the H2, that is what we put on it. Now we could go down to the bottom and have a back to top. And then again, we just need our H reference equals quotes. And then again, hashtag top. Now you can do it in this order. Just remember, I put hashtag top. So if I go back to the top, and let's just go here, let's give it the very top one. We ID equals quotes top. Now again, this is the ID. So the actual ID does not get a hashtag. I see that a lot. The ID does not get a hashtag. The H referent does, right? You're referencing this ID, so therefore it gets a hashtag because it's referencing the ID. The other one is the ID, so it doesn't need a hashtag. And if we do this, and now we see back to top, we click back to top, and it takes us back to the top, and we can go down here, and we could add back to top here as well as we're going through that. But let's go ahead and test this out real quick. So hopefully you get the idea that you just have your A tag. It's all about the fact that you have to select the ID, and like CSS, you can't just select the ID, you actually have to give it an ID. So back to Trinket, full screen, make it so you can see it. Now I am going to go ahead and copy this lorem ipsum a bunch of times because I don't actually have to scroll right now. So if you kept yours small, you have a scroll bar, but right now I don't have a scroll bar. So I'm going to paste this a ton of times. All right, now I have a scroll bar. All right, now I have a scroll bar. So I already put the last here. So what we can do is, and this is again kind of like the Khan Academy, we need to be able to go down to the last, which is this last paragraph. So we want to be able to click somewhere up here and go to that. So let's add that. Go to the end of line 9. This should be the same for everyone. Go to the end of line 9, click enter, and add your A tag. And then whatever our text that tells us to go to the bottom. Go to end. I'm going to call that end. Now we just need our H reference. So attribute equals quotes, href equals quotes, and then we have this down here. It already has its ID. So we're just going to go ahead and make it go down to there. And how do you select an ID? Just like CSS. Right. Hopefully you all said hashtag, so let's go ahead and add the hashtag. And then we go down here and look, and I called it last. So it's last, not end, not bottom. I called it last, so you got to make sure these match. So let's test it. Click, and you can see the scroll bar went down and went to the bottom. Now, if you remember, with some of those other things, the goal is to get wherever you put it to be at the top of the page. But if it's already the bottom of the page, it's going to go as far down as it can. This won't go to the top of the page. However, if I was to put it like on this one, it would make it so that goes to the top of the page because there's more to scroll down at the bottom. So do realize that you might, depending on how far you are close to the bottom, it may stop at one right here for you, or if it's within any of these, it's just going to go to the bottom because that's all the farther it can go. All right, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to give the H1 an ID, and then down at the bottom, I think the easiest way to do is go down to right before the body, click enter, and then go up arrow tab, and that puts us just all online. You're going to add a heading here that says back to top. And then you're going to give this an ID that is going to correspond to it. So basically, you're going to just do the reverse of what I did. So go ahead and pause the video. I want you to do this by yourself, this little task, see if you can. And then when you're done, go ahead and play it again. All right, so hopefully you have that. It doesn't necessarily matter the order you have. I'm going to add an H2 down here because I can. Back to top. And then this is going to be good practice for adding the tag, right? A tag inside of a tag. So a tag. Notice it did close itself already, so I'm just going to drag that to the lower side, and now back to top is inside of it. It's way down here. It's not clickable yet because we need to go in here and give it the href. So href equals quotes, and again, we can make this up, so I'm just going to put top. So back to top, and now it's clickable, but it's not, well, it went back to the top because that's the default mechanism. If it doesn't have anywhere to go, it goes back to the top. But the proper thing, what you should have, is this has an ID equals top. Over here, quotes, ID equals top. And now technically we can go to bottom, to top, to bottom, to top, to bottom. This isn't obviously probably the best thing. You wouldn't necessarily put this in H1, but I wanted you to get practice putting the a tag inside of another tag because you're going to have to do that with the LIs in the con challenge. And you're probably going to end up doing that anyway. And if you wanted a picture, you can use a picture for this as well. You could have a picture that says top. I don't know why you would, but you could. And click on picture, it says bottom. Click on the bottom and it takes you to the bottom, right? That's how you can use this. That is the internal. Again, you already know most of it from links. We're just adding that one more piece to it, which is, where is it going to go? All right, take your con challenge and then answer the journal entry, and we'll see you next lesson.